Welcome to part B. Why did money become a government monopoly? And there are all sorts of reasons why money, in fact, became a government monopoly. Iconography was a big one. In the last video, we talked about that a bit. The importance of symbols. You don't want your subjects, your citizens, your people, to circulate money with the symbols of a foreign prince. You want them to use money with your symbols. And that's a very, very powerful motive to monopolize money. And in fact, actually back in the old days, actually in the current day, you bring foreign money into the U.S., what do? You convert it into dollars. Back when foreign coin would enter a country, most monarchs required that coin to go immediately to the mint, remint the coin, put the monarch stamp on it, and then it could circulate. Then it could circulate within the country. But why else did it become a government monopoly? Well, there was a very strong argument, and I would say still today, a very strong argument that money is what you might call a public good. A public good. Money is so essential that it belongs in the sphere of state authority and should be monopolized by the state. It's more convenient for a people, the argument goes, to have a single standard throughout the land, and I think that is indeed a pretty powerful argument. If you have a diversity of mints, you have a whole lot of mints. What do you not have? Well, there's a lack of uniformity in the money. A lack of uniformity in money and currency is so central to an economy that it's been argued, and again, I believe quite effectively, that there is an interest by the state in ensuring that the people can enjoy a uniform currency. A single mint, or alternatively a number of mints, but all controlled by a single authority, the state, of course, supervised by the state. A single mint with a single standard, and then the government certifying that coin is authentic. And so the government putting its reputation on the line, essentially. This is an authentic coin. We certify this. This is legal tender. And leave it at that. For a long, long time, if you had a private mints were not allowed in most places in history. And in fact, if you did coin money privately, you were considered a counterfeiter. And in many countries, it was considered an act of treason. And you received the death penalty. That happened not infrequently in the past, centuries ago, the death penalty for privately minting money. Because you are essentially usurping the royal prerogative. And so money is a public good, the argument goes, and this is strong. And there are arguments against this idea of the state monopolizing money. But those arguments always have to, when it comes down to it, they have to answer these concerns. And these are big concerns. You want a uniform currency. Well, the state can provide that. There's a problem, though, that government certification is not always reliable. And that leads to another motive for the government monopoly. And that motive is what we call, or what economists call, seigniorage. Seigniorage. It comes from, the word seigneurs comes from an old French word, seigneur, or lord, lowercase l, lord, almost like a feudal lord. And what it means, the right of the lord. The prerogative, the exclusive right of the lord to what? To coin money. But when you hear seigniorage, usually what that's referring to is not just the right of the lord or the state to coin money, but also it's indicating in this context, the profit involved in money creation. Well, how do you profit from money creation? You can profit chiefly in two ways. And again, this is under the old commodity standard. Under the old commodity standards, which were in place worldwide up through the early part of the 20th century. Number one, you can charge exorbitant fees at the mint. And maybe they're not even exorbitant, they're just fees at the mint. If you have a monopoly on money creation, you have a law that says if you want to use money in this kingdom, you've got to use my mint. Well, there's no other choice. That allows you to charge fees at the mint. And a fee sounds reasonable because it's not costless to make coins. But historically, kings would take license to charge high fees at the mint. What amounted to a form of taxing the creation of money. And so that's one way, pretty self-explanatory. The second way is a method that we call debasement. And debasement is a very common occurrence. Historically, we will see many examples of debasement in this course. What is debasement? Debasement under the commodity monetary standard, okay, under the silver gold standard. Debasement is when the government intentionally lowers the value of money. And what does that mean when we lower the value of money? Of course, inflation. The government intentionally lowers the value of money. How? Well, today, if you want to lower the value of money, you just print a lot of money, or you just digitally create a lot of money. Under the old commodity days, governments could inflate the currency or debase the currency by decreasing the amount of silver or gold that was in a coin. Remember the unit of account from the lecture A, or the section A of this lecture 2. The unit of account represents a specific weight of silver and gold. And you'll recall that I said governments can alter that. Well, this is precisely what that is. Retaining the unit of account, the same unit of account, the dollar or the English pound, but changing what it represents. It no longer represents as much silver and gold. And so the government begins coining new money with the same unit of account, the same denomination. We'll say, oh, this is still a shilling. This is still $1. But even though it has the same face value, or the same extrinsic value, it has less silver in it. It has a lower intrinsic value. So the standards change. It's altered. Why would a government want to do this? A whole lot of reasons. But a few of the reasons, this, for one, would allow government to pay back debts more easily with cheaper currency. This is true when you have inflation for any debtor, but oftentimes government is one of the greatest debtors of all. And so government may have an interest, a financial interest, in debasing the currency and paying back its creditors in coins, in currency that does not have as much silver or gold in it as it used to. But it's still legal tender in that denomination. Or, in some cases of debasement, and this was especially grievous, the government would take that difference between the difference of silver between the old and the new standard, they'd recoin the money and then pocket the difference. They'd retain the extra silver in the treasury. And you can make a whole lot of money doing that. And some of the more nefarious monarchs, or the more desperate monarchs, might go to that extreme step. Sometimes it would be done secretly. The monarch would secretly debase the currency, and merchants would eventually find out, wait, this doesn't have as much silver as we thought it did. The monarch kept in his treasury that extra silver. Pretty wild. Actually, what you see pictured here is the old Roman currency debasement. The Roman Empire. The Roman Empire used to have a rock-solid silver currency. It was called the denarius. We're going to look at this in a week or two. But in the second, and especially in the 3rd century, successive Roman governments debased the currency in order to finance new wars. Roman Empire went through a crisis in the 3rd century. Began to break apart. And the currency illustrated that falling apart. It went from a solid silver currency, and by the 3rd century, they had a pathetic copper currency that was only a tiny shadow of the old Roman money. They inflated the currency away, and the Roman Empire collapsed shortly after. We'll look at that in some more detail, but that's one of the most famous debasements in world history. I study a lot of English monetary history. It's again, I think I mentioned in the first part of this video, a pound. If you ever wondered where does that come from, what do you mean English pound? Well, it used to represent 1 pound of silver, and that's what it was. And 1 pound of silver is a lot of silver. That's a heavy piece of silver. And so actually for a really, really long time, up until the 19th century, actually, there was no single 1 pound coin. And back when in early medieval England, when a pound meant a pound of silver, the only coins that circulated were pence, pennies. Pence is the plural for pennies, and groats. A groat was an old coin that was worth 4 pence. In fact, there wasn't even a shilling coin until 1515. And so, the pound is very valuable. But over the centuries, English monarchs gradually debased the pound during the High Middle Ages. And then one of the greater debasements occurred in 1464. King Edward IV, he devalued the pound by 20%, 20% in one swoop, right? And so a pound, by the end of his reign, was worth only 6 ounces of silver. So it's been cut in half from the original value earlier in the Middle Ages. But that was nothing compared to the debasement that was to occur the following century under this man. And you know your English history, you'll recognize this monarch here, Henry VIII. There he is, all puffed up and arrogant. Not the greatest English monarch. We'll just leave it at that. Notorious for a lot of things, but in the history of money, Henry VIII oversaw the greatest debasement in English history. He started off small and in first part of his reign, debased the currency a little bit. By 1543, a pound was worth less than 5 ounces of silver. Henry had a very, very lavish court. He was a spender, loved to spend money just on vanities, essentially, and on war. He went to war with France and in wars in Italy. Those cost a lot of money. Well, toward the end of Henry's reign, he found himself in a lot of debt and a lot of financial trouble. And so in 1544, he inaugurated what became known as capital G, capital D, the Great Debasement. And over a 7-year period, Henry actually dies in 1547, and his son Edward takes over and continues the debasement for a few more years. But beginning in 1544, over a 7-year period, the pound was debased by 83%. 83%. So that by 1551, a pound represented less than 1 ounce of silver. 1 ounce. Just an enormous reduction in value for this currency, all to finance Henry's wars and lavish spending at home. And coins can only get so small, right? And so for a while they're reducing the size of the coin, and then Henry decided, what the most effective way to debase the currency, and a lot of this he did secretly, is to change the composition of the coin. And so traditionally, is about 92.5% silver. He changed the composition to reduce it ultimately by 1551. It fell to a low of 25% silver and 75% copper. So he just kept adding all these base metals, copper being a baser metal than silver. And so that the coin you see there, essentially it was just a copper coin with a very, very thin wash of silver, so that, you know, if enough people handled it, actually the silver rubbed off, and actually King Henry VIII earned the nickname Old Copper Brown Nose, because some of the coins with his face on it, the nose had become copper because the silver had washed off. So that was a disaster. Prices went through the roof. English commerce suffered overseas as foreign merchants distrusted the pound. Why would you trust a currency like this? And so Queen Elizabeth, who was one of the greater monarchs in English history, 1560, called all the junk coins back into the mint, said, we're getting rid of all of these, we're recoining, and brought the English pound to a new standard of 4 ounces of silver. So a little less than before the Great Debasement, but nonetheless a sound currency. And the important thing here, she returned the fineness, the composition of the coin to 92.5% silver. That is what we mean by sterling silver. So a sterling silver coin. And the havoc of the Great Debasement made the English people for many decades, in fact, actually for several centuries, immune to the temptation of currency debasement, so that actually the English pound, the technical definition of an English pound, remained at about this level from 1560 all the way up through 1914. Long time. The English, for the most part, just left their currency alone. Now they introduced banknotes and all the rest. We'll get to that much later in this course. But the definition of a pound remained the same because of that traumatic experience of the Great Debasement. But anyway, I mention as an example in part because I study a lot of English monetary history, but also because it's a pretty classic example of currency debasement. So these first 2 lectures we centered on theory. But lecture 3, next lecture, we're going to dive into the history section, and we're going to begin with the ancient world. We'll proceed right through. So I'm looking forward to that. Until next time, God bless.